Hello, lovelies. Oh my God, things are getting interesting, aren't they? And to be honest with you, there's a few I told you so's I have not wanted to touch with a 10-foot pole, but this I told you so I am really interested in digging down deeper into. And that is the idea of the reality tunnel that Robert Anton Wilson brought to our attention, and I think I spoke about it in episode 2. As a reminder, I explained how our reality sits within a paradigm, and for us that paradigm is currently the materialistic prison paradigm, and within that paradigm we each have our own individual reality tunnels. Now, I took the Robert Anton Wilson idea of the reality tunnel a little bit further by saying that our realities these days are shaped more so by the information that is delivered to us by the algorithms of these social media companies. And what I mean by that is we can only create our reality based on the information that we are surrounded by. And so if they are controlling the information that we are surrounded by, they are in fact controlling our reality. And so what we are seeing today with Elon Musk releasing all of these Twitter files is that the powers that be over at Twitter went to extraordinary lengths to control the information that they sent us. And the net result of that is that it created for many people a particular kind of reality. A skewed reality based on skewed information. How could it be any other way? And let's face it, the skewing of information did not start at Twitter. The story has been skewed for quite some time. I don't know if you are familiar with Charlotte Iserbyt at all, but Charlotte Iserbyt, back in the 80s, I believe, was talking about, if you want to call it, the infiltration of the education system, and how these ideas were starting to be disseminated in classrooms and colleges way back there. And just so you know, Charlotte wasn't some crazy conspiracy theorist. Charlotte Iserbyt served as the senior policy advisor in the Office of Education Research and Improvement during the time of Ronald Reagan. And it was really interesting because she kind of told this story about how they made this department, but they didn't really care about it. And so she had access to all kinds of documents and was able to really dig into the fact that there were certain ideas infiltrating and trying to shape the American public education system. In fact, she wrote the book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. This book describes how the changes gradually brought into the American public education system work to eliminate the influences of a child's parents and mold the child into a member of the proletariat in preparation for a socialist collective world of the future. She believed that these ideas were formulated primarily by the Andrew Carnegie Foundation, and she detailed the psychological methods used to implement and affect these changes. Her father was also Skull and Bones, and she's just an absolutely fascinating woman. And what was really interesting to me is that Chance's mother, who was in education at this time, was witness to these very same influences with her own eyes. So I suggest a deep dive into Charlotte if you have the time. Unfortunately, she passed away in February of this year, but She was really one of the great heroes of our time. So the way that I imagine this information coming into our culture is that it's very much like a Fibonacci spiral. Starting from the outside, moving in, there is this slow progression of a line turning into a circle as these ideas are introduced into our culture. But slowly they become more and more entrenched, and the spiral begins to tighten, and these ideas start magnifying until we reach the zenith of these ideas, and poof, they begin to implode on themselves. Now, I want to go out on a limb and say that perhaps the people in charge of the policies and the algorithm creations did not do it from evil intentions. The fact that I recognize that there are reality tunnels and that this reality was in fact reality for these people, that they did not censor the information that they did because of evil intentions. Perhaps these people censored the information that they did because they genuinely thought they were doing it for the good of humanity. And therein lies the danger of the reality tunnel. I have been watching a lot of documentaries on NXIVM of late, and it occurred to me that a cult was kind of a special kind of reality tunnel, that there seemed to be a lot of similarities in the kinds of behaviors amongst both groups. It was almost as if the Twitter people were a member of a cult. One of the most important tools for the cult is the controlling of information. They wish to control the information that comes in, and they try to prevent any questioning of the information that is presented, and that's why they cut people off from their friends and family. They do not want friends and family questioning the information and causing any doubt in the cult member's mind. So they cut them off. They control what comes in, and they attempt to prevent any resistance to that information at all. They also use a thought-stopping technique, and a thought-stopping technique is where members of the cult are taught to stop doubts from entering their consciousness by using a key phrase that they repeat. The other thing cults do is establish an us versus them mindset, and all of these are evident in the Twitter files. So in my journey, I looked up how does one deprogram a cult member? Because it seems like a bit of information that might be useful to us. And the bad news is that kidnapping is not encouraged these days. Back in the 70s, they used to kidnap the people and deprogram them that way. But the good news, and this is why what's happening at Twitter is quite exciting, is the introduction of information that causes doubt is the most important factor in deprogramming of a cult member. So I know I hear lots of people saying things like, I've given up on talking to my friends and family. It's a waste of time. Well, it might well have been in the past when the algorithm was such that the reality was strong. But now there are cracks in the reality tunnel, at least on Twitter. So the possibility of raising a doubt is greater than it was just a year ago. The truth will set them free. Well, maybe. It's not that simple. Neil Kramer has just released a new podcast with the most amazing discussion on truth, and I put it here for your consideration. More soon, lovelies.
I guess a good place to begin is to check what we think truth is, which, like your work, my work for the last goodness knows how long, is also about that. What is truth? Before we talk about it, what is it? What is it to define that word, essentially? What is truth? And I know of perhaps a few dozen very good definitions which we could trot out, but here's one really solid and accurate definition, a sort of designation that, in my view, contains everything important, but in the smallest possible space. So this is the definition that I like. Truth is that which corresponds to reality as perceived by God. So that definition is one I like, and it contains two very critical components. Firstly, that truth is that which corresponds to reality, i.e., it's something reflective of objective reality, the state, the form, the function, the meaning, the articulation, the purpose of something. Does it correspond with external, distinct, clear, singular reality? Yes or no? So that's good enough. But the second part of the definition is even better. As perceived by God. That's the clever bit. In other words, the fullness of truth, the completeness of truth, the sort of crystal clear, high definition of truth is only really available, only really able to be perceived by the spiritual entity that designed and made the world, God. Because truth is that which corresponds with that world. So there's an inference in this spiritual definition that sort of the closer your relationship and modeling of godliness in your own life, the more of reality you'll be capable of seeing. And we are, after all, as it says, of course, in Genesis 1:26, made in the image of this divine being. We are corresponding to the image of God in his spiritual assembly. We are flesh rising to spirit. And if we just focus solely on the material world, the symbolically called the flesh, the creation itself, we actually know very little about reality if you're mesmerized by its form. Whereas if you focus on spirit, the spiritual world, the non-physical world, and the creator rather than the creation, we can know infinitely more about truth. So it's what I love about that definition is it infers that our relationship with God, it's in that relationship that we can expand our capacity to perceive and understand reality. So that, I suggest, is our working definition of truth. Truth is that which corresponds to reality as perceived by God. Now, your question, so that's our working definition. Your question is, truth divides, what's up, what you're talking about, what does that mean, what do you suggest in saying that? I see this very clearly after a long time. At first it wasn't clear that truth unites people, truth brings people together, truth creates a harmony and this and that and the other. I thought that 25, 30 years ago. I wondered if that was a cool thing and that was good. I don't think that's true. I don't think that ever was true. And I don't think it needs to be true. And there's nothing upsetting about it not being true, that truth divides. And I think a clue to it is, first of all, to understand a little bit of symbolism in spiritual literature. And in this case, we're going to look at something well-known, the Bible, the canonical, spiritual, Christian tractates, literature of the Old and the New Testament. And in the New Testament, in Revelation 1, it says, John's writing, and he says, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, which when he says that, he means I wasn't in the flesh. I was in the Spirit. I was in my, an esotericist might call astral or light body. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice like the sound of a trumpet saying, write in a book what you see and send it to the 7 churches, to Ephesus and to Smyrna and to Pergamum and to Thyatira and to Sardis and to Philadelphia and to Laodicea. Then I turned to see the voice that was speaking with me. And having turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands. And in the middle of the lampstands, I saw one like a son of man, clothed in a robe reaching to the feet, and girded across his chest with a golden sash. His head and his hair were white like wool, like snow, and his eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet were like burnished bronze when it has been made to glow in a furnace, and his voice was like the sound of many waters. And in his right hand he held 7 stars, and out of his mouth came a sharp, 2-edged sword. And his face was like the sun shining in its strength. So there's a lot of symbolism there, okay? We'll pause there. There's so many things, and we don't have time to go into exposit and exegete, all that kind of stuff right now. But we'll focus on one bit, the bit where it says a sharp, 2-edged sword came out of his mouth. That sword in apocalyptic literature, as we've just read, represents truth. It's associated with the mouth in particular. When as such, it's not about war and combat and destruction as such. In the proper context, usually when it's associated with the mouth, it means truth. And later on it says in the next chapter, therefore repent, Christ says, or else I am coming to you quickly, and I will make war against them with the sword of my mouth. So again, that's a association of truth. And then right near the end of Revelation, chapter 19, right near the end of the whole Bible, it says, he is clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies which are in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, were following him on white horses. From his mouth comes a sharp sword, so that with it he may strike down the evil nations. So first of all, we've got that symbolism, okay, of the sword coming out of the mouth, which is very important because something's being told to us here. Something simple and something poetic, and yet something very metaphysical and very supernatural. And our bit where we now introduce the idea of division is found in Matthew chapter 10. And this is Christ speaking, and he says the following, and I'll just read it for a moment and then we'll decode it. He says, do not think, remember this is Jesus speaking, do not think that I came to bring peace on the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I came to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's enemies will be the members of his own household. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. He who has found his life will lose it, and he who has lost his life for my sake will find it. So we'll stop there. What are we seeing here, bearing in mind what we just said about sword symbolism? Of course, it's about the human who distinguishes themselves by giving a damn about what is true, even if your own family don't see it, even if your co-workers, even if your society doesn't see it. We've been instructed to care about the truth from God. And the whole of Matthew 10, sort of verses 24 onwards, is about the meaning of truth, the form, the importance of discipleship. And that is discipleship to the divine, to light, to truth. Yes, to Christ. Yes, to the embodiment of God in this man. Yes. But to divinity, to truth. Truth points to divinity. And these passages explore that truth and the fear of it, the faith of it, the devotion to it, and the focus on a commitment to it, as you might say. So this lovely hyperbole, this exaggerational language, the magnification of, the separation between a son and a father and a mother and a daughter and whatnot, is intentional. Christ is saying, if you love the truth, you have to be prepared to acknowledge those who do not love the truth and instead are adoring of the world, which is not true. It's never true. And that world focus, that world adoration that right now is affecting everyone in every country in the world, this collapse of society, that was the same in 2000 BC, and it's the same in 2022 AD as we record this. The world system was always against God. In Israel today, in Rome, in London, in Paris, in bloody Berlin, in Washington, D.C., in Tokyo, in Sydney, wherever. They are secular, world-focused systems set dead against God. And if you're against God, you are against truth. And the people who knowingly adore the world system and care not for truth are everywhere. They couldn't care less about the reality of government, could they? The reality of COVID, the reality of history, the reality of morality, the reality of the spiritual world. They care only about the sort of world stories of things, the stories of the government, the stories of COVID, the narrative of COVID, the fictional narratives, which again in spiritual literary symbolism is called the flesh, to focus on the flesh, the creature, the dirt on the ground, the lowest of the low. They love people who don't care about truth, what is insubstantial, what's fake, what's illusory. They love it. And this leads to a sort of very willful incompetence and a shameful negligence, which, will be condemned and punished supernaturally. And I wouldn't like to be in their shoes on the last day. But what it tells us is that this place isn't about having a nice time and being together and being in harmony and everything's gentle and nice and kind and forgiving and everybody's okay and everything's right. It's not that. That's not the message of genuine, credible, mature spiritual literature. The message of literature like we've just read, which is historical, is real, is genuine, in my view. The message of that literature is that truth is going to rip this world apart by design. By design. The truth is more important than anything else because it's the sign, it's the marker, it's the hallmark of loving God, loving the divine, because it is indeed an emanation from him. So although it comes down into, should I get a vaccine? Should I wear a mask? Should I, bank with this bank? Should I shop on this website? Should I buy this kind of car? Should I send my child to this kind of school? That's very nuts and bolts application, of course, when you care about what's real and what's true. That's not disconnected from anything we're talking about. It goes right down into the most intimate human parts of life. So truth is a daily exercise. It's a practice. It's not just a decision that somebody makes. You have to work for it. You have to earn it. You have to sharpen your power of distinguishing and discerning truth. And that is essentially why we're here. Because the original humans were given a decision, which is, do you want to do your classroom learning in a very safe, immortal realm, or do you want to do it in a very dangerous, mortal realm, a realm where you will die? And yet, you'll have the knowledge of good and evil from the ground up. You'll be able to see what's true and false, what's right and wrong. Do you want that? And we said, yes, let's do that. And God's like, well, it's going against my proposal to you. It could be considered a sin by some, by others a contravention of will, which is not the same thing. A contravention of advice. Okay, whichever way you look at it, we chose to come to this world. And this world's primary focus is a study in evil, which is the dominant force in this world by design, so you can detect it, so you can refute it, so you can combat it. And anyone who isn't doing that essentially is part of the problem. Like in the Matrix, they become part of the Matrix, part of the problem. And so this literature, some of it written about 1400 BC, the bits that we've looked at written between sort of 50 and 70 AD, that literature is talking about this problem. It's warning us to say, toward the end, the division will be very stark, and you'll see it not just out there in the world on a newspaper or on an internet screen. You'll see it in your own home. You'll see it in your kids' classrooms. You'll see it everywhere. And that division is the teaching taking place. And although it's sad, and although it's very difficult and painful, if you love the truth, you're in good shape, because that's what this is. The worst thing you can do is ignore the truth for the sake of peace. So I absolutely condone and agree with your opening quotation, which was exactly to that effect. You have to stick to the truth at all costs. Now, you can do it with a great deal of diplomacy and respect and tact and sensitivity. And most often, not always, but most often you should. But occasionally it does require the pickaxe, the sledgehammer, where you've really piercingly got to bring something home to somebody. But in my experience, that's not most of the time. Most of the time, if you demonstrate truth in your own life and you demonstrate a sincere and considered rational approach to it, people will notice that. I think this isn't just a guy saying stuff. This is someone thinking about it. Does he have all the answers? Of course not. Does he have some stuff? I hope so. But this is someone who's making an effort to consider and to clarify and to balance cases, to balance evidence. And when you do that, you can get away with a lot of controversial remarks. You can get away with a lot of provocation if necessary by asking questions and by saying sensible things. So it has been my sort of quest, in a way, just my own little private quest, to challenge everything about the world system, everything, in a rational, philosophically human sense, with supernatural reality behind it. And so right now, the division element is no surprise to me. And as I say, although it's unpleasant often, it's also so important and healthy that what was previously hidden and previously just accepted is now being exposed in, preposterously rampant, ridiculous, absurd ways in all areas of society, which is exactly what you expect when truth comes in, because it tends to push things one or two ways, either a sudden and growing respect and love of the truth with all the hazards associated with that, or a total denial of truth, no matter how stupid or how intellectually capable somebody is. Irrelevant. The truth mostly sends people running in the opposite direction. And that's the division. That's the sword that God brought here to teach us.
More soon, lovelies. And in the meantime, I just wanted to let you know that the Magical Egypt Black Friday sale is now on, with 50% off of all of Magical Egypt products, including the 3 Magical Egypt series, The Great Work, Sexual Alchemy of the Thoth Tarot. So if you are looking for a Christmas gift for a loved one or even for yourself, now is a great time to check out the Magical Egypt website. Visit www.magicalegypt.com.